Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be talking about my top 5 hamster cages. I just want to say that these are just my own personal opinions. Of course everybody has their right to their own opinions. So if you don't agree, of course that is perfectly okay. We just all have different viewpoints on different things. So I just wanted to share mine in this video today. I do also want to say that I am going to be listing these things in order. But just because they're the first one listed does not mean that they're my most recommended cage. So if you'd like to know my top 5 hamster cages of 2021, just keep on watching. So the first thing that we have on the list is a DIY ikea linmon hamster cage. This hamster cage is completely built from wood that you purchase at IKEA stores. And this will give you about 800 square inches of floor space. You can also customize the size to your liking. If you decide that you want to be a bit bigger or maybe just a little bit smaller, of course you can adjust the wood pieces that you use. You can either buy smaller pieces or you can just cut them. And if you want them bigger, of course you would do the opposite. You would just buy bigger wood pieces and not cut them as much as you would for your typical hamster cage that you see here online on YouTube. I love that this cage gives you a very nice height, so that you can put all the bedding as much as you want. I know some cages, obviously you're limited to their bedding just because of the height or where it ends. So you might not feel like you can add all your bedding in like you would like. This enclosure is about $60 to build, which would be about 50 euros. So you begin to go very large and suitable hamster cage for just a low price. But even though you will begin that for a low price, you will have to go through the process of buying all your material as well as putting it all together, which could require a bit of help or a problem for some people, depending on how you are when it comes to building things. This enclosure also does not come on wheels, so that if you're trying to move it around, you might have problems because you're having to lift it up. Or you can, of course, add your own wheels to it, which would help be able to move around a lot easier. Now, I don't want to only talk about the pros of a hamster cage. I also want to say like cons. This might not be my con in specific, but it can also be a con for other people. So do keep that in mind. This hamster cage is wooden, so you might have the possibility of it being messed up or ruined due to hamsters peeing. So you do want to apply like a protective coating, or you might have your hamster begin to chew on it on your wooden enclosures, because some hamsters do that. In certain corners they might find being able to chew it. So you do want to make sure that you keep an eye on those whenever you're doing your cleanings, just to make sure your hamster hasn't began to chew on that. And then another thing that might not be the best thing for other people is having to have some of the building tools, just because you'll need measurements and you'll want to make sure everything is accurate, and using like maybe like a saw or a drill. Some people might not just want to do that or put in the possibly worth of hours just to build this enclosure. And number 2 we have is the IKEA detolf. This is the most popular hamster cage that you would think of, but it's a hamster cage. It's not even supposed to be a hamster cage. What we basically did is take the IKEA display cabinet and you turn it onto its side, and it has just one long amount of floor space. This is about over 1,000 square inches of floor space, which is probably the longest amount of unbroken floor space that you can have for your hamster's cage that's already not completely DIY, if it makes sense. This costs about $60. It's very cheap as well. And if you stay somewhere where you're not near IKEA, you will have to pay for your shipping, which is where the price will of course increase by a lot. So you do want to be careful with that. So some people aren't near an IKEA, so they have to pay a lot more for shipping, and they just might not want to do that, because by the time you add your shipping cost in and like other fees, you might end up paying a lot more than what it originally is, and you could almost possibly like buy another hamster's cage, if it makes sense, for about the same price. But it's just up to you and how you feel comfortable doing. The reasons why I have a little bit of drawbacks to this hamster cage is because I found them to be not sturdy, It seems to be almost like cheap glass, if it makes sense. When I would go on to clean up the sand, I was often scraping the sand, so I would often decide to not give them as large of a sand, like dedicating a whole section to sand or dirt, just because I knew that when I cleaned it, I would often be scraping against the glass, of something that you do not want, because you do not want to scratch your glass, possibly maybe crack it, so you do not want to have to go through that. Also, if you're having IKEA detolf, you have to have it, because it's glass, you have to have it sitting on top of an even surface. So like maybe your dresser, if it's not the right perfect length for your IKEA detolf, like even if it's a little shorter than your detolf, then you're risking the chances of the detolf basically bending. And once it bends so much, it will just basically break and explode. So you do have to be really careful about that. I also don't think that IKEA detolf is very high, which is why, unless you have like a raised lid maybe, then I personally would not put another Syrian into the IKEA detolf, just for my own personal reasons, just because I can't put as much bedding as I can for other enclosures, because the height is so limited. And of course I like to give Syrians a lot more bedding just because they're bigger. So what space might be okay for a dwarf hamster for bedding, it might not be okay for a Syrian, because they're already basically like double the size. So I like to give them a little bit more bedding, just because it kind of makes sense for the tunnels to give them more bedding. This IKEA detolf does not come with a lid, so you will have to also DIY your own lid. You cannot buy this already assembled, you will have to DIY it on your own. But there are plenty of videos on here on YouTube that you can watch who DIY lid. If you need to see any DIY lids, I will leave a link to a video right up here. I also think the IKEA detolf is pretty narrow. I like to fill in the hamsters cages as much as I can. But with the IKEA detolf, I felt like I was so limited on putting stuff on like this side and then on the opposite side, just because I felt like it was already basically touching each other, and it was allowing no walkway for the hamster to be able to walk through. So that's also a problem I always run into when I would be setting up the enclosure, was that it was just too narrow to put as many things and a variety of things as I like. I do think if you have help to assemble this, it might be pretty easy. Just one person to help hold things like the glass up while you're putting another piece in. But it is very easy to assemble. And number 3, we have this Niteangel Bigger World. I absolutely love this hamster cage. I have it now, and if you like to see my video of me setting it up, I will also leave that linked up above. This hamster cage comes in many different size options, so if you want one that's a little bit bigger or smaller, you have the freedom to do so. They have a small, medium, and a large for this, and it's also coming in different colors. It is very easy to assemble this enclosure. I believe I only took maybe about 30 minutes to an hour to assemble it, just because I was doing it on my own. But you do not need any tools. You're basically just sliding pieces together almost like it's a puzzle. The only time I needed a tool was to put the lid on, but it was just with the screwdriver. And what's nice about it is my enclosure came with a screwdriver. I don't know if all of them does that, but mine came like a mini screwdriver, which was perfect for me because I always lose my things. I also found the enclosure not to be heavy. When it was empty, I was able to lift it up and move around as freely as I liked on my own. I didn't have any problems with that. About the drawbacks of this cage is often in low stock or availability. Every time that I know most people will look for it, they would say that it's not in stock. So the best place I would recommend getting it from is Amazon. Amazon usually has them in stock, even though they're not all of the options available. They do have some of them in stock, which is where I seem to have found my best luck at. This enclosure is built with connecting rubber bands. I know some people do not like that just because they might not feel like it's very secure, or they don't want to trust a rubber band to hold the enclosure together. But personally, I didn't find any problems with that. I just also use wood glue on the outside just to make sure everything's staying together, just in case a rubber band do decide to pop. But I haven't experienced any rubber bands popping when I was setting it up or currently, and I've had this hamster cage for a bit of time now. Now this is just a recommendation. You don't have to do this, but you can apply aquarium sealant to the inside of the cracks just to make sure there's nothing seeping through. But it does come with of course you have your bottom board, and then you also have, it comes with like another type of plexiglass, and you put it on top of the bottom board just to help keep anything from seeping through. But if you do run into any problems or you just don't want it to happen, you can also apply some aquarium sealant to the inside, and it's absolutely safe for your hamster. Another drawback of this enclosure is the price. People might not want to pay maybe like over $100 to $200 for a hamster enclosure. Number 4, we have the new Age Pet Eco Flex. Now when you take this enclosure and you take out all the extra floors that's in this enclosure, you will actually have one nice large enclosure, which is very nice and useful. Some people just remove the floors just because hamsters don't necessarily need so much height, and I guess some people worry about like their hamster potentially falling and hurting themselves, which we of course do not want, and we want to prevent as much as we can. It does have a slide-out bottom, and then the lid is mesh, which is what most people use when they are doing their DIY enclosures for the lids, just to make sure there's no ventilation. And this enclosure has something that all the other enclosures listed that I'm talking about here does not have. This enclosure comes with the wheels, just so that it's already easily portable. All these other enclosures, you will have to add one on your own or just not having the wheel. This cage is over $200. Now I do not know if it's actually worth the price, considering the fact that you're not being able to utilize the whole cage as the way it's built, just because you have to remove the floors. So unless you take the floors and you like maybe DIY a platform out of it, just make it a bit more lower to the ground, that might be beneficial as well. And number 5 we have here on the list. This is a bit more of a smaller enclosure. I thought I would add one just for those who maybe want a hamster and they don't feel like they have the space for like these enclosures that I've listed today. This is for those who might not have maybe very much room space, but of course they still want to be able to meet their hamster's requirements and have a happy hamster. Enclosure is the Preview Pet 528. It is a bit smaller in size, however you are still getting plenty of floor space. This enclosure gives you a little over 600 inches of floor space, which is way above the 450 minimum requirement. So although it's small, it is still meeting your hamster's needs. Although this hamster cage is small, it comes with a price you pay of over $100, which is quite a lot, to be honest. If you think about it, for your enclosure to be a bit on the smaller side, you might find that to be a bit more expensive. Cage also has bars on it, so you might experience your hamster bar biting, but hamsters bar bite for a variety of different reasons, not just because their enclosure is too small, but with this enclosure having bars, you might experience that problem. So keep that in mind when you're purchasing this. And then another reason why this is a bit of a drawback enclosure is because the bedding depth, unless you put like a wood piece or something behind it on like a side of it just to allow for more bedding, the bedding tray itself isn't all that deep. But of course we want about 6 inches of bedding. The bed tray does not offer that at all, so you might be able to add as much bedding as you might want to, unless you put a board or something in between the bars just to be able to help in that ability. So that's all of my top 5 hamster cages. Thank you all so much for watching. And like I said in the beginning, these are just my own personal opinions. Of course, you do not have to agree with them. And if you don't agree with a certain cage, do let me know down below in the comments. Tell me why you don't like that cage or why you do like it. If you have a different favorite hamster cage that I did not list, also let me know about that and why is your favorite. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye.